Does anyone on the panel have any doubt, or does anyone think that Iran is not actively pursuing a nuclear weapons program at various speeds with whatever moves and maneuverings they're doing? Does anyone on the panel actually think that Khamenei is telling the truth when he says that they don't want to weaponize their nuclear program?
Well, sorry, I mean, the heads...
So I'm just actually looking for a show of hands. Does anyone believe
But the question, Nada, I mean, I think it's important to point out that the intelligence assessments, not only in America, but also in Israel, the current chief of staff appeared before the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee on Monday, and he affirmed the intelligence assessment that they have not made the decision to cross the threshold. That's where all the, I mean, and it's very important.
No, and the U.S. is, but so everyone does agree with that. I mean, I suspect Mark maybe doesn't.
No,
but
I agree with that, but that wasn't your initial question. Your initial question, which I think we do all agree with, is, I think, that Khamenei has put in place and is trying to put in place all the necessary components to give him nuclear weapons capability, so that with the quote-unquote turn of the screw, he could then make the political decision to build a nuclear weapon. I think that's...
Fawaz, just before you make your comment, Fawaz, I'm interested in something about what we understand and don't understand about these kinds of regimes. And I'll tell a story from the run-up to the Iraq War. So a few years before the invasion, a former colleague of mine at the UN who was with the UN inspection regime was part of one of the visits, and over a late-night drink with Tariq Aziz, the former Iraqi foreign minister, they were having a long chat, and I want...
drink, by the way.
Pardon me?
Who did drink?
Who did drink. That's why they were having a drink. And he said to him, Tariq Aziz said to my colleague at the time, he said, you do know why we, Iraq, the regime, can never agree to you, UNSCOM, certifying that we, Iraq, are free of weapons of mass destruction. To which my friend said, what do you mean? That's the whole purpose of this exercise. Let us do that. You'll be free of sanctions. We can all get on with life. And his answer was the Persians and the Jews. What he meant by that was we live in a neighborhood where we don't believe that we as a regime can deter our enemies to the east and to the west without them thinking we have weapons of mass destruction, even though, of course, they didn't have any. The reason I raise this, Fawaz, is that, I think one of the dangers in all these kinds of situations is that we assume a certain degree of thinking and a certain way of decision-making that may be entirely wrong. And so how well do you think we understand the regime, and what dangers are there in the way we're thinking about this now?
I mean, I think I'm glad, Danny, that you mentioned the fact about the assessment of Iranian intentions, nuclear intentions. First of all, I mean, we are speculating a great deal. The assessments really can be read in different ways, but the reality, as you said, Danny, even the consensus within the American intelligence services that Iran has not made a decision to build a nuclear bomb so far. Iran has still a way to go. We don't know how long, whether 2 years, to build a nuclear bomb. The Iranians have reiterated many times, including fatwas by Ali Khamenei, that the fact is building a nuclear bomb goes against very Islamic values and norms. These are important points for us, for the audience to highlight. The question on the table, Nader, is what to do about Iran. That's the serious question. And the reality is, the reality is, in particular, the Western powers, that Marx's narrative, the right's narrative, has defined the debate about Iran in the last 8 years. And let me say, and I really, tremendous respect for this. I mean, I've just written a chapter in my book about Iran and Barack Obama. Think Barack Obama as a presidential candidate. He was the only American presidential candidate who dared to say, I will engage the Iranians diplomatically. I will engage. I will meet the Iranians halfway. I will sit down with our enemies and talk to the Iranian leadership. And he was, as you know, taken to task by Hillary Clinton, a naive politician. Dare you talk to the Iranians. In his inaugural address, he addressed the Iranian leadership, sent many messages. Look where Barack Obama was, 2008, 2009, and where the United States and Iran today. Engagement has been replaced, not by deterrence, by the way, confrontation. This is now the United States and Iran stands on the brink of war. I mean, that's the reality. This is a major gamble. Basically, Barack Obama has forced himself into a bind by saying the Iranian leadership has not made a decision to build a nuclear bomb. If it does, I will basically activate the military capability. In his last, as you know, his last statement about the fact that he is willing to use, he does not bluff. From day one, I mean, if you look at the 3.5 years, he never educated the American public about the costs and the benefits of engagement with Iran. Point one. He allowed the Republican right, and the right within the Democratic Party to determine the debate about Iran in the United States. Mark, and I really would like to, this is a testament, in fact, and not only that, and then he can help us on this. In fact, Israel's friends in the United States went to great lengths to basically portray Iran as an existential threat. In particular, the leading democratic, and this is part of the record, we're not saying anything new. Israel exercised tremendous pressure on Barack Obama in order to basically not to engage the Iranians, because the Iranians, for a variety of reasons, cannot be trusted. The Iranians are trying to build a nuclear bomb. Not only Israel, we have never spoken about another insinuated the Arab states, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia. It's not just Israel, by the way. Saudi Arabia is much more determined, basically, and has exerted more pressure than Israel on the United States and the Western powers. Remember, I mean, the head of the snake was the comment by Saudi king, Abdullah, you must cut the head of the snake because it's evil, Iranian evil. So here you have Barack Obama faced with, a president who was really genuine about engagement, trying to see whether the Iranian leadership means business. The fact is, never educated the American public. He realized how costly the Iranian question is, allowed the right both within the Republican Party and to determine, and the pressure by Israel and Saudi Arabia. And here you have now the, okay. I'm not suggesting here, I'm going to come back to Roxanne, The Iranians' leadership from day one never took Barack Obama seriously. They believed that Barack Obama cannot deliver. I mean, how many of you know that Barack Obama, while he was talking really, wonderful rhetoric, he never intended to reduce the sanctions against Iran? One of the major lessons we learned from the WikiLeaks documents. In fact, the first few weeks of his administration, he sent his top advisor to Western capitals to reassure Western allies that the United States will maintain the pressure against Iran. I don't know whether the Iranian would have, responded to any kind of a serious, really, engagement offer by, but at least, we should have, at least the Obama administration never carried out his promises to engage the Iranians halfway. And the reality is, in the same way the debate on Iraq was won by the right, and really this is a testament to how powerful and influential the right is, and even Barack Obama himself, really, if there is one lesson that comes out for me as an academic, is the institutional continuity of American foreign policy. Regardless of how important presidents are, the reality is presidents, come under tremendous pressure by various, checks and balances, the various institutions. We are here today, we're discussing what to do about, we're not discussing why engagement, real engagement, has not, I don't know whether the Iranian leadership would ever, I really don't. I really don't, Mark, but the reality is, there was no offer on the table. There was no serious effort to engage the Iranian leadership in order at least to avoid a disaster. Now, Barack Obama is, and Mark has written on that, by the way. He wants basically to say sanctions don't really produce any, let's bomb the bastards. That's exactly what,
let me just, Mark,
it's final point, and it's all yours.
Max represents the right. So let me just say one quick point. One quick point. You've got to come to London. It's wonderful. I love coming here because I never realized how powerful and influential I was until I came to London and this debate. I'm just some short guy from Canada who does his best to try and advance world peace.
Don't get carried away. Danny, you wanted a quick word in, and then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, funnily enough, in your framing of the question to Max, I think Israelis also, by the way, are concerned about the Iranian response. Right now, the Iranian concern is the Iranian response to an Israeli strike. Less what Iran might do. But I want to pick up on something that Fawaz Gur just said, and the way that you framed this Nada, which I think was the right way of framing it. I think sadly diplomacy has largely become, sadly probably also in these P5+1, or as we call them on this side of the pond, the E3+3, talks. Diplomacy is more about how can we build a big coalition for more sanctions than what do we do in negotiations. And your question about Iranian intentionality, I don't know. My assumption is that it is not a fixed point on a map. That they, and I think others would make that assumption as well. And I think, therefore, we have something of a choice. If we're in the regime change business, let's own that politics. It may require years of sanctions. It may require the pauperization of an entire people. It may require military strikes. That's regime change. If we're in the behavior change business, you're in a negotiation model whereby, however loathsome you find your interlocutor, and I'm no fan of the Iranian regime, however loathsome you find that interlocutor, you have to think what is actually going to work in changing their behavior. I would argue that the approach we take with Iran is likely to have the diametrically opposed effect to positive behavior change. And right now, I think for some, intentionally, we're trying to drive them to a place where it's easier for us to justify regime change. And my worry is that in the interregnum, look, this Iran nuclear program has been around for an awfully long time. I was just reading, Martin Indyk was a senior American official in the Clinton administration in the 90s, when the policy was dual containment, right? Containment of Iraq and Iran. And I was rereading what Indyk wrote then, that the assessment was they're 2-3 years away in the mid-90s. So this has a long arc. I think we may well be hastening the Iranian effort by the policies we're pursuing. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is an issue of what do we prioritize. I would suggest that we are not right-sizing the Iran threat right now in prioritizing where we're going with the nuclear issue. I think the Iranian regime rather draws succor for its narrative and rather enjoys placing them in this platform where the entire world, whether you call it P5+1 or E3+3, is there. We'll go from Istanbul to Baghdad to Moscow to big up a regime whose credibility and power is in erosion regionally because of developments in the region. It's gained something in Iraq. People encouraged a war in Iraq. That worked to their benefit. But it's losing elsewhere, and it's certainly losing what it had, which is a soft power narrative. I would argue that we should be thinking about putting other issues front and center with them, not least human rights issues. That's certainly what the mainstream opposition in Iran would want. And going back to the issue that Fawaz opened with, if there's an issue that I want to test, I don't think I can get anywhere, especially where we are now. But if I want to test what's the wiggle room with Iran, with Russia, with China right now, and that I should be willing to make some give on, it's Syria. It's not a nuclear weapons program, which I don't want to be lax or relaxed about, but it's not about to reap dividends.
Okay, thank you.
That's pretty relaxed.
We're gonna do one second from you, Fawaz, and then we're going to take questions.
You know, truly, the most important question for me, as Daniel just mentioned, is not Iran's nuclear program. The fact is that most Iranians' romance with the Vilayat al-Faqih, with radical Islamism, basically has soured in the last 10 years. The reality is, that's the reality, the Iranian model has failed economically and politically. It has failed to deliver the goods. It has failed as a model to inspire the soft power. If you look at throughout the Arab world, Mark, now, reality, and not just in Iran, Iran is no longer seen as an inspiration, as a model. In fact, even the Islamists no longer look at Iran as Turkey is the model, because Turkey has been able to marry authenticity, that is Islam, with democracy,
Okay.
with institutions. And that's and the Iranian would like us to believe that in fact, the question we should really focus on what's happening inside Iran, because what's happening inside Iran and in the region itself is much more critical for the future of Iran and the geostrategic politics in the region.
Let me